Hey, we've got a problem here.
So, what's the plan?
What's your plan?
What are your plans?
What's the plan?
What's the plan?
What's your plan?
What's your plan of action?
Plan.
What's the plan?
So, what is the plan?
Wait, I have a plan.
I have a plan.
I have a plan.
That's the plan.
I have a plan here.
This plan's gonna work. Master Plan, Phase 1, Side A.
I love everything about your plan.
भाई इससे कहते हैं planning.
What's it say?
Well, it says, I love it when a plan comes together.
G'day, Holly. Welcome, students, to the Young Person's Plan for the Planet video on understanding how to build your plan. So, you know, Holly, every time I watch that video, and we show it every time we start these programs, it just always hits me how exciting this point is in our history.
Absolutely, it really gets you going, doesn't it?
Look, it does, and I'm not sure if everybody realises, but this is the first time in the history of our planet and civilization and us that we've actually had a plan for the long-term sustainability of planet Earth, and that's what the SDGs are. So we're at this absolute turning point in our history and really able to now start taking an approach to making sure we have a sustainable planet for all time. And all of our students are involved in that. So that video just captures it every time.
Absolutely. It looks like we've got an exciting lineup today as well.
Look, we've got a really busy time, but before we start that, I just want to, as usual, acknowledge Australia's traditional owners and custodians of the country, our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, the first innovators and carers for our land. So even though we've got a national and international plan, the history of Australia for over 50,000 years is that our Indigenous peoples have set an example not only for our nation but for the entire planet.
Absolutely.
So we've now got a plan for the planet, but we've also got a history in Australia from our Indigenous people. So it's an exciting time. Australia is an exciting time to have commenced the program, but now we're also joined by our students from Mauritius, and we've got, I was counting this morning, about 16 other countries who are very keen to start
that's exciting.
being part of the program. Yeah, it is. So look, today's program is pretty interesting. We've actually got some let me see, some special guests, and I think you're one of our special guests, Sally.
I think I am.
Yeah, you're going to tell us a little bit about the work you're doing and about
sure
your
am.
trip to
Yes.
Africa. Fantastic. We've got Dr. Mark Stafford Smith, who's our guest scientist. He's going to tell us a little bit about the work that he's been doing, both with CSIRO and Future Earth, and how that relates back to the science and life skills that all of our students are learning in this program. We've got some of our Pimlico High students, and we're going to actually show some of them on one or two videos talking about how they went through the build process and the prioritisation process. And then we're going to be talking a little bit about the tools, because one of the aspects of the program is a set of tools that helps all of the students not only discover what needs to happen, but also start to put it into a format that everybody can relate to, and that helps us actually put those SDGs, the global plan, into action in local communities, in states. So we're going to look a little bit at Australia and Mauritius and about how we start to build those state and regional plans. And then finally, how we build the national plan. But there's all sorts of tools on the web. So we've got our web specialist, Greg Campbell, coming along. And we've got our schools and teaming specialist, Cheryl Campbell. So they're going to join us for part of the, part of a panel discussion as well. So we're going to be busy.
Sounds like it.
So we probably better get on with it.
I think we should.
Great. Well, look, what we're going to do today is really focus on phase 3, which is the, the build part of the program. So the build is, I think I related this to a lot of our students. I used to have to go to Russia and had to do a lot of work with different countries as well as Russia, and take all the information they gave me and turn that into a game plan.
Okay.
So that today we're going to be focusing on this third part of our program phases, the second and third, the prioritization, how to take all of that information and start to narrow it down into a format that everybody can actually relate to and do something about. So it's no good having a big plan if it doesn't break down into things that you can do locally. So that's what we'll be doing. And the first part of this is the prioritization part. So I just want to bring up a slide which talks about the build phase reminder, how to prioritize your discoveries. So all of our students have been bringing together a lot of information about what's already happening under each of their SDGs in their eco-zone, and also what needs to happen. Now that's a lot of information. If we take 20 schools across Australia, 10 across Mauritius, times 10 what's already happening, times each of the what needs to happen, we've got this enormous amount of information. And the trick here is working out how to actually focus. So one of the important business lessons all the students are learning is how to focus. And we use a really simple exercise here, which is called an urgency importance prioritization matrix. That sounds really complicated, but it's really easy actually, because each of those areas we just put a number against. So if it's really important, we give it 10. If it's less important, maybe we give it 5. And if it's really urgent, we give it a 10. If it's not urgent at all, we give it a 1. So it's just a 1 to 10 scaling for every one of those 10 areas. And then what we do is add up those 2 scores.
Okay.
Not complicated.
Well, it actually sounds like the students are getting a lot of useful skills in the process of being part of this program.
Well, it is. I was actually talking to Bobby Serini, who's in charge of Inspiring Australia across Australia, about the whole STEM program and how that's really teaching life skills.
Exactly.
Not just science skills and technology and mathematics, but they're the sort of skills that, in fact, help students move into life. And prioritization's a really interesting one. And one of the interesting things I've found is people coming back to me when they hear about this program in corporations and government and saying, can you show us how you do that prioritization, because we struggle with that one.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, so all you do is add up the scores, and then you take the top four top scores, and we take 4 because of the Pareto principle, which is the 80-20 rule, and one of our students is going to talk about that after this. And then what you do is you actually start to then build a plan around those top 4. So what we might do is just have our video, and we'll have our student from Pimlico in Townsville talk about how he approached this part and then turned it into an action plan, which we'll talk about after this video. And then we might go and have a chat to Mark about how this applies to science. Great. So let's have a look at that video. We showed this last time, but it's
so the SDG I chose was clean water and sanitation. And the most important thing to remember when we were doing the research, when we were carrying out the research for this, was it had to be bigger than us. It had to be bigger than Townsville. It had to be bigger than North Queensland. So we had to look for issues that were present throughout our whole area, throughout areas that were similar to us. So if I was looking at North Queensland, I wasn't just looking at Townsville. I was looking at Cairns, I was looking at Mackay, I was looking at areas that were similar to us and all the different issues that they were facing as well. And when we were compiling this information, the most important thing to remember was we had to come up with 4 key issues that were the most important. That was what was vital to us that we needed to get solved. We had to look at importance and we had to look at urgency. And we put it into a table where we had to compile this information, where we had to identify what was our priority. So it was quite difficult when we were going through approximately 20 different issues that were diverse, but at some points they were similar as well. So we looked at where we could make some problems, we could compile, we could blend them together. So we addressed one issue, we addressed more than one issue in one statement. And then we had to identify the 4 key issues, so it was what was common throughout the whole region, so we could effectively tackle the problem. A vital tool that helped us with finding and identifying the 4 main issues was the Pareto principle, which is the 80-20 rule, which says that solving 20% of the top problems that we find means that the rest of the 80% will just solve themselves out. And that was key because we could find we could distill the 4 main issues from our 20 items that we identified, and addressing those issues would eventually mean that the rest solve themselves out and it's transferable across all of our region. I think the most important thing I got out of this was that I got an input. I got to put input into content that could potentially be changing our world, that could potentially change Australia. And as a youth growing up in Australia, I feel I do need an input in the plan, in the future of our nation and of our planet. Because we often find that our opinions and our viewpoints are not valid in this modern world, because at the end of the day, the politicians, the bureaucrats, they're all adults. Us as youth, we tend not to get an input into that and into this content, and that's what was most important for me. But also at the same time, as a student, I found that this was opening up new opportunities for me to talk to other university students, for me to explore career choices and career paths that I could potentially take. And creating links with national universities, with Questacon down in Canberra, it was vital to me for the growth of me as a student, as well as a person, where I could be interacting with schools and students across Australia. And that was particularly important to me.
I think he said it better than I was.
He was pretty damn good.
That's been one of the most exciting parts, is actually not doing this work. So the exciting part about the program is that it's actually all of the students building the plan for the future of a sustainable Australia and a sustainable world. And all we're doing is providing the tools to do that. So the other tool I was going to talk about today is the Building Your Plan, the 1-page summary. So once you've got your 4 key areas, which you pick up from the Pareto principle, and in the discovery phase, there's 5 key parts to this 1 page. And they're pretty simple. They look a little bit complicated, the words, but they're actually pretty straightforward. So the first one is, once you've got your 4 areas, what are the objectives under each of those areas? And I'll just give you an example that actually came from our Darwin team. They identified that 1 in 15 people in Darwin were homeless. So we then sat back and said, well, that affects poverty, that affects all sorts of different SDGs. What would the objective be in 5 years if we were successful? And they said, well, look, 1 in 30 people would be, so we don't get over-optimistic, but we aim to halve the number of people. And that translated really easily into how many per year? Well, 5 divided by 15 is 3%, so, or 3 people. So every year you could actually measure how successful you were being in achieving that plan. So that was the first part, and then we talked about strategies. How are you going to do this? And what they discovered is a lot of people who are homeless didn't have quite the education, or they lacked confidence. So we talked about support programs and education programs for those students as strategies. Then we started to look at actions. So who needs to do that? Department of Education, some of the social services. How do you help people get off the street so they've got a good supportive environment in which they can use the education and the support services. And basically they looked at all of the actions, who needed to do what in different government and non-government organisations to achieve that. Then they looked at all of the measures. Now that's what I talked about, which was the 3%. And then the last part was the interconnectivities. And this is back to the point we were talking about with the Pareto principle. So that in solving some of the problems with homelessness, you're actually addressing some of the problems with health, with poverty, and with a whole lot of other areas. So it's one of the interesting things we're going to have a chat to Mark about now, which is what's called systems science, about how all of the different parts, and that includes the SDGs, are actually interconnected. Yeah. So the last part of the actual one-pager, which we have actually behind us, but it's actually on one of the tools on the website, is in fact about interconnectivities. So what I thought I'd do now is have a chat to Mark, and he can help us understand a little bit more about systems science and how that relates to what we're doing here.
Sounds good.
Great. Well, Mark.
G'day Ian, how are you going?
Thank you very much for joining us on the program today.
It's a delight. It's fantastic.
So you're a systems ecological...
A systems ecologist in drylands in particular.
In drylands in particular. Yep. So I guess with drylands everything's connected.
Well, I think everything's connected everywhere actually. I mean, it's easy to see when you think about it how the sorts of things you were just talking about in Darwin, that you help people in one way, and that actually lets them not only, as you said, potentially deal with some of the food security and the poverty aspects, but maybe that means their kids get to be educated, maybe it means the women have a bit more gender equality, maybe they get access to energy. So, I mean, things flow on through the system in all sorts of different ways, as you say.
So solving one, so the benefit of understanding things in system science, and I guess this is system science, isn't it? The SDGs, yeah. Is that in solving one issue, if you understand how it links to the others, because I guess it works the other way as well. If we say we bring everybody out of poverty, but we consume all the world's resources twice as fast, then that's going to be a bit counterproductive. Yeah. So but that's part of the value of understanding system science, that you understand that this will impact something else.
That's right. So I think in relation to the SDGs, we tend to talk about synergies and trade-offs. So synergies are where you do one thing and a whole lot of other things, other benefits come from that. That's the example you just gave.
Positive.
Yeah, that's very positive. Then there are trade-offs, which is sort of the negative relationships that you just mentioned. So yeah, if we actually had really cheap energy tomorrow, that might be really good for some aspects. It would mean people had the energy to do things, perhaps lift them out of poverty. But it would almost certainly mean we would then consume a lot more. And so then we would run out of other resources, or we might put more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and affect the climate. Okay. So if we understand these things, the synergies we can really try and take advantage of by saying, okay, if we target that one, it's going to have all these good positive effects as well. With the trade-offs, it's still really important to understand them, because often if we understand them well, by doing them in the right way, we can minimize those negative effects. So for example, with energy, we could just give everyone lots of energy, but if we recognize that if we do that, that itself causes problems, then we can start saying, well, we want people to have energy, but we want them to have renewable energy, not coal-based energy, for example. Right. Because by doing that, we can actually achieve both giving people more energy and avoid climate change effects.
Because you've done a fair bit of work on climate change too, and I guess that's system science as well.
It certainly is. I mean, you can see some of the sorts of feedbacks you get in the system. So, I mean, a classic problematic one is where you start, because of a bit of warming, you melt the ice around the northern hemisphere there. As a result, you have dark water, which absorbs more heat. That means the warming happens faster, you melt the ice faster, and you get a runaway sort of effect there, which is not good. But you can also see really positive feedbacks like that in society, where perhaps by the sort of work that the students here are doing, it starts to mean that people see that these things can be done more. As a consequence, more people get interested, so more things get done, and you get a runaway effect, which is a positive sort of outcome, where the feedbacks are really useful. So understanding those things can really help us target, and as you said, the Pareto principle ideas, or trying to pick those top 4 things, often we want to try and think about the ones which are going to do something good in their own right, but also have these flow-on effects that are positive.
Now, that's really helpful, Mark, because it starts to put this in that sort of scientific but also global context, so that if we look at the planet at the moment, we've got a lot of challenges, and I think that's one of the points that came up in the discussion earlier, that we've got a lot of challenges out there. Our real task is, how do we prioritise what we focus on? And I guess that's some of the work you've done with Future Earth as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the sort of prioritising process that Alex was just talking about so well is something we really do use in science, and we should use in society. We often do, but we don't always, where we really are trying to look for the things which have the most benefit, but which are also urgent, and which perhaps also have these flow-on effects which are useful. Because it's genuinely true that by tackling a few things, this is the good old rules of thumb or the Pareto principle, that by tackling a few key things, you can carry a whole lot of other things along in their wake.
Well, that makes it a lot easier for the students, because in their discovery phase, what they'll have been discovering is there's a lot of things already happening out there, and a lot of things that need to happen. The hard part is, how do we prioritise? But as we saw last year, and we're seeing again this year, the real opportunity is to use things like the Pareto principle, as you're saying, but I'm really interested in your whole synergies and trade-offs, and I'm a pretty simple guy. I'm going to translate that into positive and negative. So as the students are building their let me see, their links, their interconnectivities, what would be useful is just to put a little positive for synergies, or a little negative that says, if we, this could negatively affect this, that, and then, as you said, to then focus in the planning process and in the build program on what's going to really give a positive impact. But be aware of the negatives, as you said, so that we don't go careering down one path and find out we've made everything else.
That's right.
Look, that's really useful, Mark, just to understand that system science way of approaching it, and realising that what we're doing is actually, sounds like it's right on track with that.
Oh, I think it's really important. I mean, if I could just finish by saying, it's easy to get totally overwhelmed by the complexity of all of this if we're not careful. And so thinking through these steps and realising that actually by doing a relatively small number of things, you might be able to have a big impact on otherwise a very, very complicated and apparently overwhelming problem. That's a really important idea to get hold of, and it's one which is useful in life generally.
So even if you're a high school student, you can be having a big impact.
Certainly.
By looking at what needs to happen, what's already happening, bringing it down into and focusing it, and then turning that into a plan for action.
That's right, and doing it in a way which just thinks about how things connect to the rest of the system, rather than getting too fixated on just delivering one little silo. That's incredibly important as well.
Mark, thank you so much for your insights today. We really appreciate this. Having a real scientist here and talking about how this all works in the real world, but in the end, the plan is for the real world. So your insights are very, very helpful.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that was tremendous, wasn't it? Look, we've got some more insights from our Pimlico team too. They're going to tell us a little bit more about how they approach this to put some of Mark's points into practice.
My SCG was decent work and economic growth. It focused on the economic growth and work in my ecozone. I found a lot of my research online through government reports on different plans that they were putting through in the future, such as 2030 plans and 2050 plans. And a lot of these didn't get put through in action when they were proposed, but they had a lot of information that was pretty good for what I was trying to research and find to improve the economic growth potentially in our ecozone, especially since it was for this whole region. Being part of this program has opened a world of opportunities for us.
We got to travel to New York for the United Nations International School United Nations Conference. Here we got to collaborate with 700 students from across the globe. Being part of this program is a stepping stone in allowing you to become a global citizen.
This is your opportunity to secure your future for your planet.
That's exciting. It's really good to see how our students from across the country, and we're hoping to have some of our Mauritius students giving us some of their feedback next time, are able to take the principles that Mark has talked about, this systems science, and apply it to solving the challenges we're facing on the planet. Now, the good news is we've got a whole set of tools to assist. Now, we've talked a little bit about these before, but today what we're going to do is to have a chat to some of our experts who've helped set up the tools on the website and across other schools, so teams working together to actually make your job easier. So we not only have the Pareto principle and the strategic planning framework, which we've just looked at, but we've got a whole lot of support tools. So we're welcoming to today's program Holly Halford-Smith, who you've already met, but we get to actually have a good close encounter with Holly and find out a little more about her work. With Greg Campbell, who's basically set up and operates the website, so making sure everybody's name's in there so you can access, but also all the tools and support systems are there, and also Cheryl Campbell, who coordinates with all the schools and makes sure that everybody's getting the support that they need. So we're going to now have another panel discussion, and I'm looking forward to helping you understand a little bit more about the tools and the people that are behind the program to actually help this all happen really well. So I'm going to go over and join them now, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the tools for the program. Well, look, welcome Cheryl, Greg and Holly. And Holly, we've met before, I know you're up there. But look, we might start with you because everybody's been seeing you joining the program, and I haven't really told everybody much about you, but you've got a really interesting background. You're studying at ANU at the moment?
I am. So I'm doing a Bachelor of Laws in International Security Studies.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why did you choose that?
Well, initially when I left school, I was going into the whole exercise science field. I was sporty, sport was my hobby. But I spent time over in East Africa with a community that I'd been involved in for about 6-7 years prior to that.
Mm.
And that sort of just, I guess, opened me up to a different sort of world, and I realised perhaps law and security, but more from a human security perspective, was perhaps the way to go.
Okay. So part of your work in Africa and your interest helped really guide what you wanted to then start studying in university.
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah.
And I guess that's influencing what you want to do after university, so your whole career path.
Yeah, undoubtedly.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been involved in this sort of thing for about half my life now. So,
Right.
yeah, it really has been sort of guidance and understanding what I want to do and what I feel like I can contribute.
Okay, that's really interesting because we get a lot of feedback from the students about how being involved in this program has really started to help them focus more on what they want to do as they move forward and what they actually want to study.
Yeah.
So that's really useful. We might come back to you because I know you've just been over to Africa,
Yes.
talking to some of the school students in Tanzania and Kenya.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm really interested to know what you discovered there. But before we do that, we might just talk to Greg about some of the tools that we actually have on the website. So Greg, you've been really the mastermind, the key in making sure the website, and I know I'm really pleased you've got your Sustainable Development Goals t-shirt on. Perfect. So I'm really interested, Greg, to understand a bit more about the tools that we have on the website, the resources that we have, the fact that the students can get on and see examples from other students about the work they've done and able to pick up on that. So what sort of things are there to help the students on the actual Plan for the Planet website?
Well, I think it's particularly a collaborative effort, and in the Ecozone research area, which I think is step 2, there's links to all sorts of national, international and local websites, which are just starter links to get the students off onto where they're studying. And in the forums, we've got the expert area forums, which covers all of the ecozones, and in the students forum, it covers all of the SDGs.
Okay, so the students can go onto the website and not only go through the actual program, how to actually do the program, because there's all detailed instructions on there, the lesson plans, but they can also get information from the experts, so there's information on there about their SDGs, and there's also a student forum, so they can exchange ideas, actually talk, literally, on the website, so that there's an actual forum there.
Yeah, there's several forums, and we're looking forward for more feedback. You can have a review of what was there already from last year to see the work that's been done by other students, as well as the links that are there, and certainly to add more links that you've found are actually valuable and go beyond the starting points we've given.
So if a student finds something that's really useful, say in Townsville, but might be really helpful for, say, the team in Victoria, they could come back on through the contact details on the website, let us know about that, and we could load up that information.
Precisely, exactly what we want: more collaboration and how we can all help each other. That's what it's all about.
Look, that's the perfect step into talking to Cheryl, because Cheryl, you've been working with all of the schools and all of the teachers around the country and really building that teamwork. So one thing I was going to mention was, in fact, the most important tool. So we have all these clever tools like forums and websites, etc. But the most important tool really is teamwork, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think teamwork is crucial to anything working well. And I'm absolutely blessed and rapt that we're working as a fantastic team on this with all of the students and all the teachers around the country, and in Mauritius as well, because that's actually the grist for the mill for getting some really amazing plans and collaboration and cooperation right round, and the information that they're able to exchange with each other, which we would like to expand more with our forums and things like that, is a fabulous thing to do. So keep up the good work, guys.
Yeah, look, that's really interesting, and that links back to the discussion about the systems science. In lots of ways, we're actually setting up a system here, aren't we, between all of the students in the different regions, so that if they discover things there, they can load that up onto the website. We also talked about the conference and how students were able to exchange, and next month we'll be talking about the details of this year's conference, so all of the students can start to get prepared for that. But even let me see, in different places because of our ability to interact over the web. We're able to collect that information, and I think you were saying, Greg, that there's a whole lot of examples from last year about the work that's been done. So the students this year have all the advantage of last year's work that they can look at and say, that's a great idea, but then that'll work again this year because we'll have another year's students' ideas, and we're always accumulating knowledge on the website.
Yeah, so each of the EcoZone upload pages, they can look at those and see the work that was done there from last year, and a few good photographs as well of the teachers and students in their area.
Oh, so we want photographs as well?
Photographs as well. We've got a little piece on each upload page about that. So certainly we'd like to see more photographs of all the people contributing to this process. It's quite amazing how it's coming together, and we want to make sure that we can see all of those who are involved in it.
Okay, so look, that's great. That gives us a real sense of there's a team supporting you as students. There's a set of tools to make this easier, and I think the really exciting part about that, Greg and Cheryl, is that as a group of students, it's not just taking part in the program, but because everybody is uploading things onto the web and is able to do that, they're actually contributing to the development of the program, the information base we've got.
I think that's right. And when we saw at the conference last year, the teams, the students that came together, they had such an incredible time. They started to learn networking with each other. They were getting in, they were getting numbers, they were connecting. They were actually setting up little ways of having their own social pages so that they could start to continue the information after they went back to school in their various states. And it was that networking process, which is a bit like what they have to do with the Sustainable Development Goals. They need to work out what all the interconnects are and work how everything comes together in a whole. So it's really starting to think a little bit outside of just me and what I can do just here, but that I can do a lot more here with the help of other people in a team and working together.
Yeah, it's interesting because in business, everybody talks about different tools, but my experience, and it's about probably 15 years working all over the world, the most important tool was exactly what you're saying, teaming. And it's interesting, Holly, you've just been to Africa. I'm really interested in how the African students have, let me see, how you found the work that they were already doing and their interest in this particular program to expand it there. And I think you were Tanzania, Zimbabwe and Kenya.
Yeah, so that's right. So I went round to several schools across all three of the countries. I guess for me, it was just really inspiring to see the energy that students had towards, I guess, taking that step forward in trying to solve some of the issues they're facing locally. I was actually just speaking to Cheryl about an example of a student in Tanzania who recently won a climate change award for last year based on his conception of...
A local award or an international
award? An international award. Based on his conception of bricks made from plastic. And the idea of that basically was to solve the issue of houses eroding, mud houses eroding due to flooding. So I guess if we look at it in this sort of sense, it's all about sort of applying science and innovation into solving these issues. But by getting youth on board, they're able to have this sort of say in how their future is going to look. And similarly, there's a student in Zimbabwe who came up with an idea of turning potato paste into a battery. So, there's all these sort of opportunities, and it's all about thinking outside the box, I think.
That's interesting, isn't it? So if we look at today, we've talked about a whole lot of different things as we've gone through. We've talked about looking at the big picture, taking all of the inputs, then prioritising it, then turning it into a plan, which is the build process, that one page. But then what you're talking about is the students then starting to say, well, look, there's an example of here of something we can actually work on and actually developing that into a solution. that they can then work in either their local community or, as we saw, is a solution that applies to a lot more people than just their local community. So,
Exactly.
So it's really taking it all the way through. What's the big picture? How does it all connect? How do we prioritise what we want to do? How do we communicate that in a plan to everybody? But then how do we pick things from there that we can actually start to make happen? So students can be involved in the big planning picture, but also the actual zero and focusing down.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's all about building a movement. So
It is. It is. I got the real sense that we had a movement last year when we had the conference, didn't we?
We did. And I just want to say my background in some part is in management education in universities.
Right.
And one of the interesting things is that the management principles that were used there sounded a lot more complicated with the MBA work that we did and the graduate diploma in management work. And what you've done is converted those core principles, which are so key to what we need to do to move forward for planning, into great, simple, easy principles that the students can grab onto, learn, translate into their future careers, going into their jobs for the future, and they're our leaders of tomorrow. And I think that is just fantastic.
Well, it is, and I think the point we started at with this program was really looking at whether those sort of corporate principles and business principles, which is really how the world operates, it's how the big companies operate and are so successful, could be applied to sustainability on our planet. And I think the lesson from last year is that they can, and our students have been able to pick up on those principles, apply them, I think, beyond any of our expectations. So that's really exciting. And then this year, the program in Australia and Mauritius is really building on two further aspects, not just building the plan, but also then starting to interconnect, work out how we can interconnect with other schools. And so part of the planning process that we'll have for this year in both Australia and Mauritius will be the regional plan, and we'll start to look at state plans as well as our national plan, and also the ability to interconnect as groups of students to actually support each other in building those plans. So it's an exciting year this year in taking all of the fantastic work done. As you were mentioning, Greg, it's all on the website, but taking that one step further with our students this year in interconnecting both across the country, within states and internationally, and then taking that next step of starting to build those regional plans.
Absolutely.
Look, that's absolutely fantastic.
That's a
Thank
plan.
you both very much. Holly, I think it's more than both. Thank you all very much for joining us today. And I think, Greg, you've brought a copy of the plan. So we're going to be creating one of those for each of our states and regions.
That is the plan, yes. So,
That's the plan.
We've got national plans and regional plans as well, which are very more specific to each area. But of course, everyone can see the differences and the similarities and the contrast to their area, which will also help them make their plan as well.
Fantastic. Well, we've got all the groundwork there. We've got all the tools. We've got the frameworks. But I think that's pretty much all we're going to have time for, Holly. I'm just looking at our next steps. I'm going to pop back to the other main camera, and we can finish off those, go through
Sounds
the next
good.
steps before our next broadcast next month, and then we can close off. So
Let's get to it.
Let's wander over. Right. Let's just talk about what all of our students need to do to take it to our next steps on the program. So the first thing to remember is to make sure everybody is registered. I know there's still some registrations coming through. If more people want to join the team, feel free to do that, so that we know there's always changes in schools. So just make sure if you're joining the program make sure you're registered on, and then you can access the website. You'll also get the Young Person's Plan for the Planet Mail, and you'll get the monthly YouTube broadcasts. These ones get access to those. Second is just to start moving on phase 3, your prioritisation and the build phase. And again, all of the details on how to do that are on the website. Today was really really painting the surround to that, why this is important, why we're doing it this way, and that whole systems science approach. Next thing is next month we'll be talking about the conference, so watch out for that, and we might even give some little clues to that in the meantime on the Young Person's Plan for the Planet web. And then the final thing is to tune in next month, where we'll be talking about how you take all of those individual one-page plans and you start to combine those together into your regional plans. So I think everybody's going to be busy for the month. Holly,
sounds like it, yeah. Lots to be done.
Lots to be done, but pretty exciting, and lots of support for the students to actually do that.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, look, I think that's it for today. Thank you, Holly, for joining us.
Thank you, Ian.
Thank you all our guests, Greg, Cheryl and Mark. And let me see. We look forward to the next month and our discussion at our next broadcast.
See you next time.
Thanks very much.